Hello, and welcome back to the Relationship Clinic podcast. I'm Renee Natvig, your host, and today we continue our series, Divorcing with Dignity. My special guest today is attorney Ashley Filimon. Ashley graduated from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington and Barry University School of Law here in Orlando, Florida. Her legal expertise includes adoption, paternity, and divorce, and she specializes in disputes regarding child custody, guardianship, agreement modifications, DCF interventions, quadro, and wills and testaments. Ashley uses strategic negotiations, effective mediation, and direct trial experience to ensure the best possible legal outcome is achieved for her clients. As an adoptive parent herself, Ashley understands the emotional trials that an adoption or a change in custody can bring to her clients, adoptive parents, and birth mothers. She has an innate ability to balance the needs of the family with the requirements of the court system. Her concentrated focus on family law demonstrates a history of success in directly managing divorce, paternity, and guardianship cases. Ashley's reputation is precisely defined as, or described as, fair but firm, and she's widely known for her child advocacy initiatives. Enjoy the interview. Well, welcome, Ashley Filimon, to the Relationship Clinic.
Thank you.
And for continuing our podcast series on divorcing with dignity.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so what I know about you is your tremendous support of both children and families, right? So maybe you can help us understand what your biggest interests are as far as helping people have a dignified divorce, how you like to support people, or how you found yourself even in doing this work.
Sure. For everything that happens in our practice, we surround all of our work, product, and ethic around children. Okay. So most of what we do involves some sort of custody battle. So we will do things that are just property, but that's generally not our primary interest. It's more the custody battle and the ins and outs of time sharing and what's appropriate for the child. And many times that gets lost in the divorce battle, and I find that it doesn't need to be a battle if you can get both sides to be reasonable and think about the child first.
And how do you support people in doing that?
Well, it's hard. I think you start with the questions of what is your family, when it's not in crisis, what does your family normally do? What are your habits? What are your traditions? What are your holidays? Who's involved with the children? And if you can get them to thinking about those types of things first, it takes them to a happy point, and then you can maybe refocus them to maybe this is what's best for the child.
To maintaining that.
Correct.
Versus moving into a different space of...
Instead of mine, yours kind of situation, which tends to happen. And, we can't have the baby, so we've got to figure out how to do it best.
And I think that's what has kept coming through in our series here and helping people understand that it doesn't have to be a split it down the middle, the half the baby or whatever, half the orange or half the anything, that it can be a much more... helpful process to the whole family.
Well, a lot of people want to say, I want 50-50. They come to us with 50-50, and I don't know if that's because it's the way it's advertised or the way their friends talk or, what the situation is. But in a true collaborative environment where everyone is trying to work for a better solution together, it shouldn't be necessarily 50-50. It should be the idea of how do we do this appropriately for our family.
And so if it's not necessarily 50-50, how do you help people understand what would be best for the child? Like, how does that, in the collaborative process, how does that go? In the litigated, in the table,
sure.
Kitchen table?
Well, in addition to whatever their traditions are, you might talk about the child's extracurricular activities. What are their individual interests? How do we keep the child focused on, what's best for them and moving forward in their lives, and them meaning the parents being the support mechanism for the child. And if you can just keep refocusing and going back to that, and it's not about 50-50, it's about what's best for this child and what does the child already do. Sometimes it boils down to school district, which parent is going to live in that school district or in that school district. It might also involve the parent's work schedule. Sometimes their work schedule can't accommodate a true 50-50. And when you start asking them truly, what is your schedule? And you write it down, and then you break it down on a calendar, they start to see that, well, maybe I can't even do a 50-50.
And maybe, as you're talking, the meaning of the 50-50 might be, I want to show that I am a responsible and caring parent.
Sure.
So what you're talking about is, how can we break that down to responsible and caring, but in practical terms, what does that mean for the child?
Sure. I think it's about ownership a lot, and people don't like when you say ownership in relation to a child. But when parenting comes down to the bare basics in a divorce, it does become about ownership. That's my child, that's your child, that's his child, that's her child. It's no longer our child. And I think that's where the 50-50 comes in. Plus the state, just by sheer fact that they have to have it worked out from a child support standpoint, has it at 50-50 or less, and you have to put down the numbers that you spend with your child. And I think that drives a large portion of it, and you've got to pull them outside of that space and have them think about, well, what was your family like when it worked, when it was happy? What works for your child? A lot of times it's the pet. We have some families that the pet goes wherever the child goes.
Oh, okay.
You know, because if you've got a dog and now the child leaves the dog 3 days a week, 4 days a week, that's traumatic.
Right.
So some people also divide the child with the dog. So it just depends on the family. But if you can refocus them, you're going to work out a better solution, I think.
So your focus starts with children.
Yes.
And whatever would be in their best interests. And so what has that then led you to, and the different ways that people might contact you or know how it would be helpful to contact you about what the work that you like to support people in? Is that strictly collaborative? Is that mediation? Is that...
Well, it tends to be all over the board. We see a lot of just straight custody situations where it's more of a time-sharing solution. They might be part of a divorce, but more times than not, now we're seeing a lot more cases that would just involve parental time-sharing outside of a marriage.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's a generational thing or what that is, but we deal a lot in those paternity cases where you've got time-sharing that needs to be established by one party or the other, and they may not be married or intend to be married, but the child's still left on the fringe.
Right.
So we've worked in and around Central Florida in those types of cases, paternity and divorce and adoption now for 6.5 years. And so we talk to people in the community about what we do, and then our customers go out and talk to other people, and it's just kind of, it spreads that we care about their children. It's not just a transaction for us. It's
a core value of why you're...
It is, because these children that are part of these litigations and these situations right now are our future. And so if we mess them up, then we've not done our future a very good service as well. So
you take lots of families that may not be in a traditional marriage situation and help to develop a plan so that the children's needs are served, and to help the parents understand what those, or help them develop what those are.
We hope.
Yeah, that's the ideal. Yeah, that's the ideal that you're. Yeah,
we hope. Even some of the situations we've had that were not ideal, and maybe didn't end the way necessarily that one client, even ours, would have wanted. We get feedback later on that, we wish we had paid more attention to what you were saying with the child and how to best serve our schedule or our child's schedule, or how that works into a full environment. And we wish we hadn't spent so much time having the baby, so to speak. So I think that that's really the approach you have to take to begin with.
So is most of your work then with figuring out that time sharing or paternity situations, are you settling that out of court and then presenting your plan, or are you working through the court system to do that? How are you doing that?
Most of our parenting plans do get resolved outside of court.
Okay.
The only ones that do not, is probably about a 3% of the time situation.
Okay.
So most of them are resolved outside. And when they aren't, it's usually because one party is just completely unreasonable. And even if your client's reasonable, you can't make the other party reasonable. And if the other party's unreasonable, sometimes it's just, then your role has to become to do the best damage control you can for the child.
What's that look like?
And sometimes it's, maybe I have to give a little just to protect my child. Or if the other person's dangerous, you don't give it all, and you just have to just trench in. And then that's when you've got to go for a full litigation standpoint. And, that's unfortunate. But what you really want to do is just try to, defend against the danger that's on the other side as best you can. And sometimes they're not necessarily dangerous. They're just so unreasonable they can't see any kind of solution. And if either they have an unreasonable attorney or they're representing themselves, you can't make headway, unfortunately.
Okay. And then that would lead to an alternative kind of situation where you just have to have a judge's participation in all of that.
Sure, yeah. The judge has then got to get involved, and the judges' calendars are super busy, and they deal with all kinds of things all day long that I can't imagine. But they are, that's when they'll make that decision, and it might not be better for either party if the judge decides what the schedule is. If the judge decides, where the child's going to go to school, or what extracurricular activities the child's able to do or not able to do. So those are situations I think that are better resolved within the family if possible. But some people won't see it.
So how is that for you? Is it frustrating, or do you just kind of keep your mind to, we're just going to keep doing what we can do? How do you manage? It sounds like some pretty difficult situasituations, really.
I try to manage it, but
I
think it seeps in. I take it with me. Because, I care.
Yeah.
So I unfortunately am horrific at giving out my cell phone number and people texting and calling, and I probably don't manage it very well. But, you just try to think, well, what would you think, or what would you want in this situation? If this was you and you had this problem, what would you want for your attorney, and what would you want on your side? And what kind of team do you want assembled, and what kind of answers do you want? And I try to regroup myself, and I try to remind myself when I'm really frustrated that I'm sure these are all perfectly great people. They're just in a bad situation today, and that they probably wouldn't be this way if I saw them out and about in town and I didn't know any of this. So
trying to handle something that's so, that's just so difficult.
Well, for people, it's real. I mean, they're a lot of times afraid they think losing their children. And I don't know that you're necessarily going to lose your child. It's that you may have less time with your child. You may have to have a different type of relationship with your child. But they come in with the attitude that they're losing, usually. And so it's just a matter of education and trying to come off of that situation a little bit.
Okay. And are you doing that like attorney to attorney? I guess I'm trying to make sense of, is that in a like we've talked in this series about collaborative process? Are you doing that in some different kind of way when you're not having to go to court? Are you choosing a collaborative process, right, that's now kind of defined, or are you doing things some other way?
I think a lot of them end up being hybrid. I mean, in a true collaborative process, it follows the collaborative process.
Right.
But for the rest of them, the clients will come in and they immediately want to go straight to court because that's what they know.
Okay. That's what they've heard about.
That's what they've read on the internet, whatever. That's what they come for. And then usually I'll ask, okay, what's the situation with the other side? Do they have an attorney? Will they have an attorney? Do we know who that is? And 90% of the time, they are represented by somebody.
Okay.
And I will call the other side and talk to the other side. And a lot of times we work it out between the attorneys and the parties before we even get to a formal mediation or a hearing or something of that nature.
Okay.
So I mean, it's a hybrid, really.
Okay. And you have that kind of maybe persuasion or encouragement of people that they are willing to go that route, and the other person's attorney joins you in that goal?
Sometimes. It just depends on how and what part of the process we've started.
Okay.
So recently I had a consult where my client was going to file for divorce, and I suggested, based off of their financial situation and their family situation, that they go a true collaborative. And I educated her on what collaborative meant for her, and of why that might be a better solution rather than fully fighting it out, which is what she came prepared to do. And I wrote a letter to the other party and said, you have X amount of time to respond, and we'll go for a collaborative approach. But if you have not responded by this time, then we'll take that to mean that you're not willing to do collaborative, and then we'll move forward with something else. And, if they then reach out and start to research collaborative and say, what does that mean, and who does that involve?
Because there's still quite a few attorneys that don't necessarily aren't familiar.
Correct.
Right.
It's a small group, probably, out of all the family lawyers that do collaborative.
Okay.
Because I do believe there's more money in the long run in not being collaborative. But clients don't realize that, because that hourly biller concept, it just starts eating away, and then there's no incentive to settle.
Right.
It's just to continue the fight.
If you're in that litigated process, you
correct.
mean?
And so when you're in the collaborative world, there's a solution in sight. There's a there's a laid out process. Everybody's going to go about it a certain way. We're going to get to an end, and everybody's going to have that end decided by the parties, not by the judge at the end of the day. So eventually that's the better model to go through. But I think when people come in, they think, oh, that's going to involve several meetings, and that's going to be timely, and that's going to be expensive. I'll just do this route. Maybe I'll be done sooner. But what they don't realize is that just keeps going. It's like a snowball effect.
So maybe that would be something you'd want people to know as they're considering their options then. It could seem like you might be done in a couple of hearings, or in a couple of, I don't know, working it out.
Usually, even if you go to mediation and you solve your case at mediation, it's going to be a minimum of 6 months before you have a final judgment.
Right.
And that's if you go to mediation and everything works out and the calendar aligns, then you're there.
On the short end. Okay.
Right. And I think that's just really hard for people to understand. I don't know if it's because they watch too much television, or they see a billboard.
But maybe, what we see, but without knowing the backside of what all goes into those crystallized moments of when people are actually in front of a judge. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot behind the scenes that they don't realize, and especially with the children, because you've got to have the parenting plan, you've got to have child support, you've got to have it worked out with insurance and medical care and things of that nature. And I think that they don't think it all through until you're in it.
It's hard to, when you don't know, when you've never, most people, they're doing this for the first time, right? Or maybe the second, but in any case, you've never been through it. So how do you think through? How do you make it real to yourself, what all of this is going to mean?
I think it's a big fear of most people that come in for the first time, because they are fearful that they're not going to be able to live on their own.
So that's what this is starting to mean now.
So financially, how do I make it? Physically, how do I make it with a child? Like, how am I going to get the child to and from school, or to and from daycare, whatever that looks like. And then there's the emotional aspect of dealing with the friends and the family, and those kinds of things. So it's a process.
Right. Fear of this new way of being in relationship to your child and this other person that you had the child with.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not easy stuff.
No.
Okay.
No, but I'd like to think at the end of it that most people are able to regroup and say, okay, that was a bad time in my life, but it's past.
And how do I look forward to doing this?
and be able to co-parent together.
Right.
That's the point in coming to a solution versus a final judgment by a judge.
Oh, say that again.
So if you come to the solution on your own instead of the final judgment just by the judge, we all get the final judgment. But if the judge decides it, then how are you going to go sit at a ball game or at a dance or at a piano recital, whatever it is, side by side with your child, or later on with new spouses or new significant others, whatever the case may be? How do you go to your child's wedding? How do you do all those things to support your child?
When you haven't had any experience of creating a resolution, you mean, like in that first?
Yeah, if the judge comes to that solution, then I feel like there's a certain amount of hostility. Somebody in the group is going to say, I didn't get what I wanted. And it could be that both of them didn't get what they wanted.
Right.
And so now both parties are hostile
about
at
what they
future
didn't get.
events. And it's so hard to then co-parent and be a friendly, separated family later.
Right. Which is in the best interest of the child. But maybe there hasn't been the preparation to do that.
Correct. And I see so many people who come in and they have toddlers. And it's hard for them to see that far down the road. To what about the ball games and what about the weddings and the graduations and things of that nature? And you just have to say, well, think about it. In 15 years and 16 years, what's going to be happening in your life? And do you want to be in one spot and the child's mother or father or whoever to be in the other spot? And the child's now got to choose who to come to. That's just not an enviable position for anybody to be in.
Right. And knowing, and I think that's part of what we're hoping to spread here, is that there are other possibilities.
Absolutely.
Not easy possibilities, but there are. And what we might have seen on TV is not the only outcome.
Correct. And absent some sort of mental illness or something that's just, unusual, most parties loved each other enough to get in this situation and have a child. So you got to go back and find that respect and honor just that part of it to get out of this so that your child's whole.
Okay. So child focused, and your cases tend to start there. However, that has landed people to see you, and sometimes that does involve financial aspects of things, but that would be mostly because people are pursuing maybe an actual marriage or not. When people aren't married, are they using your support and splitting up those finances as well? Okay.
A lot of times people have purchased property together. They're not married, but they own real estate together. They might have other kinds of personal property, that kind of thing, together, have children together. So those are parts and pieces that have to come up with the division of that relationship. And a lot of times that's really complicated because it's still emotional. The marriage is the legal license, but that doesn't mean that it's any less emotional for those who don't have that piece.
Right. So you'll be dealing with them with the financial piece, the child piece, anything else that you support people with in your practice?
Well, I think we walk them through the whole process. Is there a support element other than child support? So, in a marriage situation, how long have you been married? Is there one that's a primary income earner in the family, and how do we survive that, and how do you divide up that money and support the other person? If I'm representing the income earner, I always encourage them, this was important to you to be the income earner and to have your spouse stay home or support you in your career, whatever the case may be. So you need to honor that in a way that, allows them to form their own life and get started again.
Bringing a voice of reason, I'm hearing, right? That was your intention.
Want their money.
Right. At that point.
You asked, or you at some point had some sort of conversation or acceptance that you were going to be the breadwinner and your spouse was going to be the helpmate at home. So you have to honor that in some meaningful way, and then we talk about what that meaningful way is. And then if I represent the one that needs support, usually the challenge is, let's be realistic.
Same.
So let's not think that we're going to get all of his money or her money. Let's not think that we deserve everything on a silver platter, because you made this choice, but your spouse made the choice to go out and to earn and to grow and to continue to support you in this lifestyle that you had while you were the helpmate. So you've got to honor that commitment that was made on the other side, and let's not do it in a way that's cutthroat.
And hard to get that doesn't necessarily get you more of what you want if you're going after it in that way. I mean, in the cutthroat way.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually a couple conversations just to get realistic expectations going.
Okay. Yeah. That's helpful, I think, just to help people kind of have a peek, like peek in the window of, so first I'm probably going to hear about how I'm not going to get everything that I'm thinking I deserve, and how to start wrapping your head around that. Not that you're not their advocate, right? Because you are.
Sure, you can be an advocate, but I think if you call an attorney's office and they tell you you're going to get everything and you're going to be 100% satisfied, and they're so aggressive they're going to get you everything, then
suspect.
I don't think that's going to work out, and somebody's going to be disappointed because it rarely works out that you get your entire silver platter situation.
All right. Well, I am thinking that kind of covers the ground of how you help people and the way you help people. Is there anything else you would like people to know about this process, or what their options are, or how you things that you wish people would know more?
I wish people would understand that their relationships are investments. So they've invested in this relationship up to the point that it has not worked. And especially when it involves children, they need to continue to invest in the relationship with respect to that portion of the relationship. They're going to sever the finances, they're going to sever the relationship and go on and probably have other meaningful relationships, but that doesn't mean that they can't continue to invest in a new relationship with that person, and just a new type of relationship. I think that's the thing that's the hardest for people to understand. This is a new. So you've got to embrace the new and really work on that, just like you did getting into the relationship to begin with. You've got to work at getting out of it, and what does it look like moving forward? Work on getting out of it, but still putting effort into doing that in a way that's supportive to your child and to each other. Because people want to tie things up in a neat little bow. I'm done, I'm divorced. But it's just not that simple. Right. And so it's better if you go ahead and say, okay, I am done and I am moving on, and they're done and moving on, but we're going to forever be attached to one another with this child. So let's go ahead and embrace that and figure out what that looks like, separate and independent from what has occurred in the past. Right. If they came with that expectation, we would have less divorce attorneys. And things might go a lot quicker. And very good. Yes. So the new, and in some ways, kind of swallowing that bitter pill, right? Like, yes, this isn't what I envisioned, but coming to some of that acceptance is going to serve me well in moving forward. And emotionally, I think it serves the party that's feeling and thinking that way better. Right. Because if you're geared up for a fight all of the time, you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, it starts to affect every part of your life. Right. So in whatever process they can do to get supported, whether that's coming to a therapist, maybe on their own, or talking with people who will support it ultimately being a good process. I think as many outside sources that are trained or qualified to help, with that separation process is a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, if people want to get a hold of you, if you could we'll have this as part of our information, but if you could give people a sense of your contact information,
Sure.
what that would be. Yeah.
Sure. You can reach me at legalperson.com, and our phone number is 407-801-5022.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.